Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, May 13th. Hope everybody's having a great day so far. We have a lot to get into. We're going to, of course, cover the massive news in the NBA with Jayson Tatum going down with an Achilles injury, what that means for the future of the Boston Celtics, as well as what it means for their playoff runs this season. We'll get a little bit into some drama in college football with UNC and Bill Belichick, his personal relationships, how that might affect the legendary head coach and his program now that he's newly in the college football sphere of things, along with much more. We have today joining us Jake, a co-host here at GSMC. He does the college football podcast here with us. But before we get into him, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, May 13th. But like I was saying, we do have special guest Jake in here with us today. How are you doing today, Jake?
Doing great, Jeremy. Excited to be here. Let's talk some more sports.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to start off with probably the big story from around the entire sportosphere today, that being Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum, of course, superstar for the Boston Celtics, the reigning champions in the NBA. Jayson Tatum goes down with a scary injury, a right Achilles injury, where he's already had surgery take place. This is going to affect the Celtics not just in the short term, down 3-1 in a series without your superstar that was putting in a tremendous game, but also in the long term. We don't know how he's going to come back from this. He's going to miss all of next season, potentially a playoff run next season if the Celtics were to make it that far. This is an injury that timeline is probably around a year. What does it look like for the Celtics without Jayson Tatum the rest of the way, and more on down the line for the Celtics, you think?
Yeah, this was already kind of a critical point of the Celtics organization in this 2025 season. Um, Going into next year, if they keep this entire roster together, this is going to be a team that's going to cost them almost $500 million in terms of salary, luxury tax. So this was already kind of a crucial juncture for the Celtics before the Tatum injury. Now you add this on, it really kind of murkies the waters around their long-term plans, I think. You have to call into question whether Drew Holiday is going to be back, whether Kristaps Porzingis will be back. Could they move off of Derek White? This team could look a lot different than we've seen previously. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep this iteration of the Celtics together. Then you add Jayson Tatum's injury on top of that. This is a really tough point for the Celtics right now, and something that they're going to have to address in the offseason, in the long term, for the future of this franchise, for its direction. What will they do with that kind of core group that's really expensive to keep together right now? They're probably going to have to move off of somebody. Not really sure who yet, though. I think that's going to be one of the big question marks around this team.
Right, and you bring up the point that they're going to have to move off of people. There's a new ownership group in Boston. The old ownership group sold simply because this team was going to get way, way too expensive, right? You talk about a team that's going to cost $500 million. Right now, the Suns have the most expensive team ever, and they're sitting at about $240 million for that roster. You're looking at doubling that. And that's what happens when you build a super strong team like the Boston Celtics have in a league where they're trying to avoid these super teams from being built. This was the last kind of go around for the Celtics to have that full roster. You assume that Kristaps Porzingis, who even if he does stay, only has 1 year left on his contract, never going to play another game, I should say, with Jayson Tatum again, right? Jaylen Brown, the Finals MVP, you have to keep around. You have to build around your duo. Not only are you not going to move off Jayson Tatum, who's a top 5 player in the NBA, you can't right now because he's injured. So that leaves a couple of expendable pieces for the Celtics as we move on into the future here. You're looking at, of course, Derek White is someone that is kind of on the fringe. Al Hortford's a little bit older. His contract runs out. Not sure how or if they're going to be able to keep him. We brought up Kristaps. Drew Holiday is another name that I think is really interesting that could be traded again. He, of course, came here over from the Bucks, a Bucks team that won a championship with him. He's getting a little bit older. There's a couple more expendable pieces over there when it comes to trade pieces for Boston, but it's going to be real tough for Boston. That's not to say that they're going to be a bad team going forward, because they're still going to have probably the best or one of the best duos in all of the NBA with Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. But you also don't know how Jayson Tatum's going to come back from an Achilles injury. An Achilles injury can be lethal for athletes, right? Obviously, it's no longer a death sentence like it used to be in the 1980s and the 70s and even a little bit into the 90s. But this is one where athletes don't generally come back the same. Damian Lillard suffered this injury earlier on, and I'm not sure he's ever really going to play a meaningful game of basketball ever again. His game at his age, I don't know if he'll really be able to recover fully. But Jayson Tatum, I still think has a little bit left in the tank. I've seen people call doomsday scenarios saying that Jayson Tatum will never be the same again. He's never going to get back to the peak of scoring 42 in a must-win playoff game on the road. What do you think his future looks like, Jayson Tatum in specific, away from the Celtics?
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree with the idea that he's never going to come back at the same type or quality of player that he has been. This is a guy that at his peak, and he really kind of seemed like he was starting to hit that peak this year. This is a guy that's a top 10 player in the NBA. And I think his youth will also be a factor here. It's not like he's Damian Lillard. He's not 37 years old. He's mid 20s. He's still in his athletic prime of his career. Um, I think this is obviously a completely debilitating injury, right? Achilles is a brutal injury to go through. And yes, if he does come back next year around playoff time, he probably won't look the same, right? But that's not to say in 2026, 7 down the line, he will not eventually get back to that level. I would lean more on his youth, his work ethic, his ability to kind of get back to that level. Maybe not the first year he comes back, maybe not in the first couple months he comes back, right? But I think further down the line, this is a guy that can get back up to that level where he is scoring 40 in a playoff game again. Maybe his game looks a little different. Maybe he focuses more on fundamentals, technique, that kind of stuff, compared to leaning on athleticism. But this is a guy that never really fully was leaning into as athleticism as a player. He's always been a skill based guy. And this is a dude that I think can come back from this injury. Might not be right away, but I think in 2-3 years, we could definitely see the same kind of Jayson Tatum again.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely could see that kind of Jayson Tatum again, but bringing it a little more to the current state of the Celtics. Down 3-1 against the Knicks here, a Knicks team that has come down from 20 points now 3 times this series. What do they have? Do they have a shot here? They're obviously their backs against the wall. 3-1 don't happen that much. Comebacks like that without your star player. Can we see Jaylen Brown step up? Can we see the rest of this stacked roster, especially a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, who has not had a good series at all? I know he's battling through injuries. Do the Celtics turn it in? Is it Knicks in 5 now? Do we see a chance of the Celtics in 7 here at all?
Well, I think when you see injuries like this too, they can go one of two ways, right? The team can be completely deflated and just kind of toss the towel and say, we're giving up. Or you can have the opposite where everybody really kind of buys in, rallies around together. And this is a Celtics team that is certainly talented enough to kind of rally together and maybe make this series more competitive again. I don't know if I really see that happening right now, though. The way that the Knicks are playing, Jalen Brunson is that dude. But then you move off of Jalen Brunson. McCall Bridges hit some massive shots for them in the last game throughout this series. This is a deep Knicks team, a team that can compete, that's scrappy. I don't know if Boston can climb their way back into this series. Now, maybe they do steal game 5. I don't know if it gets past game 6, though. I think this is a Knicks team that will eventually win this series, especially after the kind of disappointment of last year's playoffs. They want to get to that next round and potentially have a rematch with the Indiana Pacers, who knocked them out last season. I don't know if I see Boston coming all the way back from this. I think it's possible that they maybe take game 5, but not sure if they can really advance past that game 5 right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely going to be a real tough battle, losing that number one superstar for you. But you bring up the fact that they still have Finals MVP Jaylen Brown. Excuse me. They still have a guy in Kristaps Porzingis that should be able to step up. Drew Holiday is an excellent defender in his own right. You had Peyton Pritchard, was 6th Man of the Year winner. This is a team that if any team can survive losing their star at all, it is this Celtics squad, no doubt about it. But there is no way it's going to be easy. You need to get Joe Mazzulla needs to get his team going. He needs to light a fire under them so that they come out in game 5 ready to play against a Knicks squad that is just feisty, right? We talk about the Celtics opening these leads. It's not like they haven't been able to come out strong. It's the fact that they haven't been able to finish. And as long as they can, get those late game situations down, even without Jayson Tatum, I think there's a real world where this Celtics team at least pushes this to 7 games. I don't really know if it's going to happen because having an injury like that is really, really tough to deal with. But I do think that if any team can do it in the NBA, it would be this Celtics team for sure.
One of the deepest rosters in the NBA. Like you said, they still have a bunch of talented dudes on this team. Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. They have a strong team without Jayson Tatum. Obviously, you want to have Jayson Tatum, right? That's a top 10 guy in the NBA. You would love to have him on your championship team, but this is still a really good competitive Boston team. There's certainly a world where they can win the next few games, potentially push this to a game 7. It's just, will they kind of come out with that fire in game 5, or are they going to kind of be deflated and, really down in the dumps after this injury to Jayson Tatum, their superstar, their main go-to guy? That's going to be the big question, is how this team kind of comes out and performs. They certainly have the capability to make this a competitive series again. I agree. I think of the teams in the NBA, Boston is probably primed the best for dealing with this type of injury to their superstar, to be able to bounce back, win a few games. That's certainly in the realm of possibilities. It's just going to be, do they actually come out with some fire in game 5, or is this going to be a Knicks team that shuts them down in that game to win this series and move on?
Only one way to find out. Game 5 takes place a couple days from now. That is going to be a massive game to watch. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NBA Draft Lottery. The Draft Lottery, of course, finished up last night. The big surprise, a 1.8% chance, Dallas Mavericks with the first overall pick. But there's a couple of other nuggets in there with the 2 and 3 pick and what might go on and what is a really deep draft class this year. We'll break all of that down coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need your shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, May 13th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over everything you need to know about the Celtics, Jayson Tatum, and how his Achilles injury might affect them into the future. In this segment, we continue our basketball coverage with the big news from yesterday, the NBA draft lottery. The Dallas Mavericks get number 1, Spurs number 2, 76ers number 3. We're going to talk about all the ins and outs of the draft lottery with Jake, co-host, the host of the college football podcast here in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with us here on a beautiful Tuesday, May 13th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the NBA draft lottery here a little bit, and we're going to start off with the big story. The Mavericks, number 1 overall pick. They've already come out, a report from Tim McMahon today, saying that they're going to take Cooper Flag. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not they were going to use that pick in a trade package for a guy like Giannis, or they were going to hold tight and pick Cooper Flag. There's still a lot of speculation about what this Mavs roster will look like with Cooper Flag. Do you think holding on to this pick is the right choice for the Mavs? What do you think they should do, if not?
No, I think it's certainly the right choice for them, especially when you consider the Luka Doncic blockbuster that happened just a few months ago. This organization desperately needs a young face of the franchise type player. Yes, you have Anthony Davis. Yes, you have Kyrie Irving. But both those guys in their 30s, injury-plagued players, you get the guy in Cooper Flag, who has been one of the best probably American prospects since Zion Williamson, one of the best college basketball prospects in recent memory. This kid is a winner. I think you take him, no brainer for the Mavericks. I know there has been kind of speculation about would they trade this pick. I think though, for both the short and the long term kind of future of Dallas, this makes the most sense, right? Cooper Flag, the way he kind of plays the game, he's a winning basketball player. He contributes in a lot of different areas. And at the minimum, he's going to come in and give Dallas a super high floor player that they can slot right in next to Anthony Davis in the front court. A guy, though, in the long term, too, you look at him at what he could potentially be. Could he be an all-star type of player? Yes, I think that's certainly possible. So you extend that window from now 2 to 3 years to where Cooper Flag's there, you potentially have 5-10 more years of competing in the West. I think that's the right move. And I honestly think this was kind of a bailout card for Nico Harrison, who was really kind of on the hot seat after that trade. But you keep that pick, you get Cooper Flag, you put him with Anthony Davis, with Kyrie Irving. That's suddenly a team that looks much scarier in Dallas. And then in the future, this is a good move for them long-term as well. Cooper Flag can eventually transition to that face of the franchise type player for them if everything goes well in his development, in his progression as a player. I think it just makes the most sense. And I think it's the right long-term move. Yes, you could trade that pick to get a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, but that's probably going to keep you around the same window of this current Mavs team right now. if you add Cooper Flagg, it extends that lifeline for them. And I think it just makes the most sense for Dallas, for that franchise moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up the key words that I was waiting for someone to say. Bailout, right? That is the one that we're looking for. This was a bailout of epic proportions. They move off of Luka Doncic, a top 5 player in the NBA, who already at age 25 has 5 all NBA selections, a guy that was going to keep their window open for 10, maybe 15 years if he has a super long career, instead trading it for a win now mode, which on its face, adding Anthony Davis to that squad doesn't necessarily make it a bad move, but it takes away about 5 to 10 years of a competitive window, which that makes it a bad move. They get bailed out here. They get Cooper Flagg, that he's not necessarily going to be that same level of player that Luka Doncic is, but he is the best American prospect we've seen since Zion Williamson. Maybe the best American prospect that we have seen since LeBron James. I personally think Zion was a little bit of a better prospect, but there definitely is a conversation to have there whether or not Zion was a better overall prospect than Cooper Flagg was. It's going to be really interesting. And you talk about the roster that it's going to look like in Dallas now. You have, of course, your Anthony Davis, Daniel Gafford as your front court. You have Kyrie Irving when he comes back, Cooper Flagg, and then whoever you want to throw into that 2-guard role. You have Derek Lively as well coming off the bench. In case you do need to make a trade or anything, you have some depth. That is instantly a very, very talented squad, especially in a very good Western Conference, that if everyone clicks as it kind of looks like it will in my head as sort of the puzzle pieces coming together, they could compete for a title over there in the West in a very, very tough conference. But outside of the Mavericks with Cooper Flagg here, there's a lot of other very interesting conversations, I think. Mostly with the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs get that second overall pick. Their roster doesn't necessarily need a guy like Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper is the next guy up in this class, a guy that last year would have been the number 1 overall, in a lot of other classes would have been the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He is a guy that can be a franchise savior. He is someone that doesn't really fit with this roster. He's basically going to play the same role as De'Aaron Fox would, as Stephon Castle would at the top over there. You have Wemby down low. You get him a pairing. How likely do you think it is that the Spurs hold on to that pick as opposed to trading it? And Giannis is, of course, the hot name. It doesn't have to be Giannis. I've seen some people say trade the second pick for Anthony Davis or something like that with the Mavericks. Do you think the Spurs hold on to it, or what do you think the Spurs do it too? Because that's also intriguing to me.
Yeah, there's certainly a conversation to be had there in the front office in San Antonio. But I agree with you. I don't think Dylan Harper fits on this roster. You look at, they made the trade for De'Aaron Fox to give them that point guard, the pick and roll type guy to pair with Wembanyama. And then you also have Rookie of the Year Stephon Castle. So they don't really need Dylan Harper. I certainly think that there's a very real chance they move off of this number 2 overall selection. This is a team that is looking to make that big jump, right? Wembanyama is going to come into year 3. They have an all-star point guard now. They have a couple other really intriguing young guys on this team. I would not be surprised at all to see them offer this number 2 up to one of these teams that are maybe looking to offload an all-star. Do they try to go for Giannis? They certainly have the assets to make that happen, but I don't know if that's the full move they do. I don't know if they maybe try to move for another disgruntled all-star type player. I don't know. I don't think it's super likely, though, that they end up holding on to this number 2 overall pick, just because they have so many other options to kind of get contributing players from this pick. If they were to trade it, I think they could certainly add to their roster and get better fits for that roster compared to what they could get at the number 2 overall selection. They really need a wing. I don't know if the value is there at number 2 to go and reach for a guy that maybe they like. San Antonio's obviously, they kind of run things their own way, but I don't know if it makes sense for them to hold on to that number 2 overall selection when you're looking at the long-term fit future of the Spurs.
Yeah, for sure. There is a guy in Ace Bailey that I think might be an interesting fit there. But do you really want to do that at 2 when you also have that 14th pick in the lottery? You can combo for someone that I think might be a little bit better than Ace Bailey immediately while your window is trying to be open. The other one that I thought was really interesting as far as the NBA draft lottery results was the Philadelphia 76ers. And we were talking a little bit about this before we went live here, but at pick 3, they get to keep that pick. If they'd have been 6 or later, they would have had to give that pick up to the Thunder, and God knows the Thunder don't need any more picks after all. They've got way too many already. The Philadelphia 76ers are a really interesting team right now. They could really do just about anything at this draft. Let's assume that Flag and Dylan Harper are both off the board at number 3. The next pick seemingly would be to get that wing and Ace Bailey, but you have a lot of really talented players already. You have your backcourt already set, probably with Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey. You have a hopefully resurgent Paul George and a hopefully healthy Joel Embiid. They get a solid player. They get a guy that they can slot in to play that 3 role for them. That is one of the best starting 5s in all of basketball, and they're not paying $500 million like the Celtics are paying to keep that roster around. I talked a little bit about this with Marab yesterday, Jake, but what do you think is the ceiling for this 76ers team, especially getting that number 3 pick? Could they find their way back to the top of the Eastern Conference after an incredibly unlucky, unfortunate nightmare season for them?
Well, I think the one word you said, the key word is hopefully, right? This team, if everything goes right, they could be a top tier contender in the Eastern Conference, but everything hasn't gone right for them right now. You saw Paul George in his first season there really struggle. Embiid needs to stay on the court. Yes, I think that backcourt is set, and I do agree. I think they probably go for a guy like Ace Bailey that can develop into a really high-level scorer for them, give them some added depth kind of on that wing in case Paul George maybe continues his decline. But I think if everything does click right, there's certainly a team to watch out for in the Eastern Conference. This is not a super deep conference right now. You have a couple teams in the Cavs. We don't know what's going to happen with Boston. But the Cavs, the Knicks, the Pacers seem to be right up there as well right now. But this is certainly a wide open conference. It's very possible that Philly can vault back up to the top of the Eastern Conference with a really solid draft pick at number 3, with that roster just bouncing back from last year. If Paul George gets back to any version of his prior self, that's an all-star wing, a guy that can really help your team. If Joel Embiid can play, 60, 65 games, which for him is a big ask, this can be a really great 76ers team. It's just they're going to have to hit on that. Everything's going to have to go right for this team to kind of bounce back. But when you look at the talent, when you look at the on-paper roster of the 76ers, especially if, say, they do add a guy like Ace Bailey in the draft, that's a really dangerous team in the Eastern Conference, a team that can certainly compete to go to the finals, to win the East. I think that's very much their ceiling. We'll see if they can get there, though. They certainly did not look anything like their prior versions in 2024. They're going to need to bounce back. They're going to need Paul George, Embiid to step back up. Even if you do get a really high-level rookie, it can't all be on that rookie, right? You got to have your stars step up and push the Sixers team back up into the top of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, for sure. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit here in this draft is just the way that they do this lottery system at all. That's kind of come into fire of this, not that every year people are going to say that this is rigged. Every year people are going to say it's rigged. And you know what? This year might have a little bit more legs than some other years. But regardless of whether or not it is rigged, you have the 4 worst teams in the NBA picking 4, 5, 6, and 7. You have a team that just, if they had been healthy all season long, probably would have made the playoffs, a team in the Mavericks with the number 1 overall pick who just made the NBA Finals last season. This isn't necessarily going to help the product of the NBA. What is the best solution? Is there a way to discourage tanking while also making it so that the teams that are at the bottom can find a way back up without being kneecapped by luck every once in a while? Do they need to abolish the lottery system in the NBA?
I don't think so. I think they need to keep the lottery system. When you look at the actual goal of what the lottery kind of is trying to do in the NBA, this season is a great example of that goal being achieved, where you did have your bottom teams, they're all kind of picking lower than they expected. And you had teams that were right on the cusp of the playoffs. They're picking 1, 3. The Spurs were a decent team until Wembanyama got shut down too. So the kind of whole concept of the lottery was to prevent tanking, was to kind of limit that, trust the process, 76ers type vibe. And when you kind of pair that with everything, I don't know if you get rid of the lottery system. Could there be ways to tweak it? I'm sure. There's always kind of ways to adjust it. You maybe adjust the odds of, if there's a team with a worse record, maybe you increase their odds of getting the first overall pick a little bit more. But to get rid of it completely, I don't know if that would be the right solution. You already see a lot of teams, franchises trying to tank in the NBA. And I think if you got rid of the lottery system, that would probably just encourage more teams to kind of adopt that tactic to try to get a top overall selection. So I don't know if getting rid of the lottery system is the answer. Could there certainly be tweaks? Yes, for sure. But I don't know if getting rid of it is the long-term solution there for the NBA.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the solution. I think you're kind of hit the nail right on the head with what they need to do. They need to adjust it a little bit because you've seen teams like the Hornets be basement dwellers basically their entire existence, right? You've seen teams like the Wizards who have had blips of success be basement dwellers basically their entire existence. The Pelicans, blips of success, you get it. You can go further and down the line forever. These teams that have been down there forever, maybe you do something along the lines of the more times you're in the bottom 3, you have a higher chance of getting it as opposed to just resetting the odds every year. There's no one clear solution, but I do think that the lottery needs to change a little bit. I think there needs to be some kind of reform, whether that be abolishing it completely, which I don't necessarily think would cause that much because tanking's going to happen regardless, right? Tanking's always going to happen. It's kind of been blown out of proportion in the NBA because of how much one guy can change the fate of your franchise, which is why I think the NBA does need to keep the lottery. But there definitely could be a better way for it to function. Maybe we just get to see the balls drawn live, even if it's not great television. Maybe we get a camera in there so we can see as opposed to it being all done in private. So we can stop with all of these, it's rigged. Nico Harrison gets his job saved for giving the Lakers a new breath of life so the league can have ratings over there. It's all luck. But regardless of that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to college football. There's been a lot of stuff going on. The spring transfer portal window still basically closed at this point, yeah. But we're going to focus a little bit on UNC. That's kind of been the big story with Bill Belichick, his personal life, his girlfriend causing some issues, and how that might affect him as he starts a new tenure over there in the world of college football. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, May 13th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over just about everything you're ever going to need to know about the NBA Draft Lottery, the first 3 picks, what's going on with them, maybe some reform as well. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football. We are today joined by the host of the GSMC College Football Podcast, Jake. We're going to go over all of this craziness going on right now at the University of North Carolina and new head coach Bill Belichick. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with us here on a beautiful Tuesday, May 13th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into everything we need to know about Bill Belichick and the situation at UNC. Of course, it is kind of private, kind of public. It's been a weird mix of TMZ drama kind of sports reporting going on over there at Chapel Hill. Of course, a lot of this is going to be blown out of proportion because you have the greatest NFL head coach of all time and Bill Belichick leaving the NFL kind of disgracefully, not really getting a job after he wanted to get another. Shocking to me over there, but UNC takes him in, and he's promised to make an NFL style of football, but it started off kind of as anti-Bill Belichick, the culture, as it possibly can. Jake, what's going on down there in North Carolina?
This is just a really interesting situation overall. And when you think of Bill Belichick of past, of this Patriots dynasty, right? This is a guy that was always super savvy with the media, always kind of knew how to avoid questions. You know, you think of the press conference where he's just answering every question of, we're on to Cincinnati, right? That was just his answer. Notoriously tight-lipped, especially around injuries, stuff like that. But the page really seems to kind of have turned here with his venture into college football, where he's now being ever more present in the media. And he had a CBS interview a few weeks ago on the Sunday morning show, and where his girlfriend kind of interrupted multiple times. He was asked a question about how him and his girlfriend met, and she kind of stepped in and said, we're not talking about this, which would have been a non-discussion, right? If he had answered that question, normally said, oh, we met on a plane ride in 2021, which was already kind of public knowledge. This had been announced already. That was how they started their relationship. That's how they met. But she steps in, kind of says, we're not going to talk about this. It goes from a non-story to something that's much more interesting. And if you look at her role around North Carolina, there were emails that were leaked where he said that she needed to be CC'd on all future emails regarding pretty much all football operations at North Carolina, kind of has taken over almost as a PR manager type for Bill Belichick. And then you go to this today where Belichick sits down with SportsCenter on ESPN and basically says that Jordan Hudson has no role whatsoever in the North Carolina football program. Kind of seems like that's not really the case. They were also supposed to have Hard Knocks come and film them this year, document their season, the annual HBO series. They hadn't found an NFL team. They were supposed to go to Chapel Hill. That all kind of just fell apart. And it was rumored that Jordan Hudson was a big part of why that deal completely fell apart. So it seems like Bill Belichick is not really Bill Belichick anymore. Is this the true Belichick? And he just has kind of hidden it really well throughout his time as an NFL head coach? Or is this something where maybe outside forces are influencing him a little more and his decision-making process? And then will this translate to on the field? What's going to happen? There's kind of been question marks about, is his focus actually on the North Carolina football program? His girlfriend competed in a Miss Maine competition this weekend. He was there front and center, and kind of called into question of his commitment to North Carolina, to building this program. So the big question mark here is Bill Belichick actually really focused on North Carolina right now, or are there other kind of factors outside of his realm, his decision-making, that's impacting what they're doing there on Chapel Hill?
Yeah, one side of this story that I think is really fascinating, at least to me, is that transition from the NFL to college football. It is a completely different world, right? You hear college football athletes, NFL athletes say it's so different. That's why we see coaches that were legendary in the college football ranks, like Nick Saban, like Urban Meyer, struggle in the NFL because you don't always have that kind of ultimate control, which is something that I felt Bill Belichick wasn't going to struggle with. But another thing that's new this year, at least in recent times, I should say, is the NIL side of it. The fact that you now have to kind of play GM with a bunch of 18-year-olds, right? These kids aren't necessarily, and their agents aren't necessarily, or if you can really call them agents, aren't necessarily negotiating in the best faith all the time, right? And there's still, it's a wild west of rules over there right now. You have no idea what kind of legislation is going to be passed, all of these bills going back and forth, settlements going back and forth between the NCAA and their medley of different lawsuits going on surrounding this issue in particular. I think it's tough for a guy like Bill Belichick at 76 years old to come in and just immediately adapt to this situation. He's been used to having it work one way basically his entire life. Now he has to shift and go to completely the opposite end of the spectrum when you're trying to build a team like this. I think actually something that he's trying to do, and maybe I'm way off base on this, is listen to his girlfriend a little bit more, because she's frankly a lot closer in age to these athletes than he is. She kind of understands where they're coming from a little bit more than he might. And I think that's something that, while it's not his main goal, is something that he's trying to just get every single possible advantage out of whatever relationship that he has. Now, how much he's really in football, it seems like this is very much a temporary gig. He has in his contract written out, of course, that when he retires, his son is going to take over, which kind of already says as, hey, I'll coach for like a year or two maybe, but then I'm done here. So he doesn't seem all the way committed right away, which is something that I think also is a part of this that might have seeped in as well. He's living the retired life. He's living the retired life. He had to come out and do his thing, and he had a lot more media attention when he wasn't coaching. He had a lot more appearances on ESPN, a lot more appearances with Pat McAfee. maybe that opened him up a bit. Maybe that changed the way he did things without him really realizing he got into the groove of doing media. There's a lot of things we don't know about this situation, of course. It's still ongoing. There's been flip-flopping reports of whether or not his girlfriend is banned from the program or not banned. Right now, we're on the not banned side of things, but tomorrow, maybe even 2 minutes from now, it could come out that she's banned again. There's just so much going on right now in this situation that is developing, but it is definitely a little concerning. You talk about a UNC team where their variance this season, it could be anywhere from college football playoffs to a team that misses a bowl game, right? They are probably the biggest variant team as a part of the Power Four simply because of Bill Belichick. He, as a coach, can change that program immediately, or he could sink them if he doesn't do it right. What kind of side of the coin, with all this drama coming out, are you leaning towards for a UNC outlook as far as this football season goes?
Yeah, honestly, I've been really struggling as well with projecting this UNC team because, like you said, their range of outcomes is wild. It's can go anywhere from them being a 5-win team to, potentially competing in the ACC. I don't know if they will be competing right away necessarily. I think this is certainly a team that could go 7-5, 8-4. I think 8-4 is probably realistic for them. We also look at the roster here. This is a roster very much in transition. Just in the spring portal, they lost 18 guys, brought in 16 guys. Did bring in a big-time quarterback in South Alabama quarterback Gio Lopez, who's going to take over as the starter there, a guy that was super impressive for South Alabama, but transitioning to the ACC, will he be able to keep up that production? That's going to be a big question mark. But this is a roster that has holes everywhere pretty much. And they also lost their best pass rusher in Bo Atkinson, transferred to Ohio State in this portal, lost a couple other really solid pieces for them. So we're not really sure kind of what this team could look like. I certainly think that Bill Belichick will have some kind of positive impact for them on the field, right? You're talking about a guy that's arguably the greatest head coach in NFL history in terms of just what he brought to the table. Just that experience, that level of expertise will give UNC a much needed boost at the minimum. Will that big jump occur this year? Could a big jump potentially occur next year? But it's also very possible that Belichick flames out at the college level. Like you said, this is a guy that was entrenched in the pro game. He hasn't been a college coach, I don't know if ever. I got to double check that. But if he was, it was 50 years ago. This is a guy that is going to have to adjust to that college level. Will he be able to kind of talk to 18 to 22-year-olds on their level compared to when he's coaching grown men in the NFL? That's going to be a big challenge for him. So I think this is a roster that we're not sure kind of how they're going to look. I'm projecting for them right now about 7-5, 8-4. I think you're going to see a little bit of improvement from them on the field. I just don't know if they're going to make a huge jump this year. I think they're going to be a bowl team for sure. I just don't know. Will that big jump occur? Will it not? We're going to have to wait and see. I think Gio Lopez is going to be a big part of that conversation as their quarterback now. If he performs really well, the quarterback is the most important position in football. When your quarterback plays well, it helps your team out. So if Gio Lopez can do that there, potentially this is a team that could outperform expectations. I just don't know if I see them getting there this year. I think they're probably a 7-8 win team for this upcoming season.
Yeah, that is the big question. Quarterback, Gio Lopez is a guy I like. I've watched a lot of Sun Belt games graduating from James Madison, so we're familiar here a little bit with his game, and he's someone that could step up and play really good football, right? Again, it all comes down to the combination of quarterback and coaching. UNC lost a lot of talent, but Bill Belichick brought a lot in. I think you're right that the ceiling for this team, while it is super high, they're probably not going to hit there. And it's not necessarily because of the drama. It's because this team, any team that completely overhauls generally needs at least 1 year to at least 1 year to start over, at least 1 year to figure out its identity a bit and, change what it's doing to be successful. So next year, I think, is the big year for UNC, but it has to start off at least a little positive. Otherwise, I think this Bill Belichick experiment is going to end a lot sooner than a lot of people think when it comes to UNC and really his entire role in college football. But we're going to move on. So thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to this segment here. Jake, thank you so much for joining us today. Go check him out, College Football Podcast here on GSMC. He's live every day just like me. Go check him out. Lots of stuff. It's never a dull day in college football, ever. But thank you for joining me. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast, talking about Trey Hendrickson and what's going on with him and the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see you then.
To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news, subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, May 13th. If you were just tuning in, you missed all of it with Jake, the host of the GSMC College Football Podcast. Go check it out. We talked a little bit about UNC. We talked a lot about basketball. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL. One of the big stories currently developing right now is what's going on with Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson, of course, the NFL sack leader from last season, a runner-up in Defensive Player of the Year to Pat Surtain. He had an amazing season and is now looking to cash in. The Bengals, of course, notoriously a little bit of a cheap franchise, not necessarily the biggest fans of paying all of this money to all of these guys. They, of course, extended T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the same day, same agent, basically the same deal, just a little bit more money on top for Jamar Chase. Those two guys are set for the long term, but then now they need to go and address the defense. The defense, of course, being a massive, massive concern. We did see Trey Hendrickson show up to Bengals minicamp today. Did not dress. He showed up. He talked to the media. He had his media availability. The big quote coming out of that is he said he's not going to apologize for the going rate of defensive ends right now. Now, that might imply to some people that he's trying to get that top of market rate, that Myles Garrett, Max Crosby kind of money, which he could be, and you wouldn't be mistaken for trying to reset the market if you were him or his agent, but you also have to look at reality. Trey Hendrickson, while he is an incredible football player, he is not Myles Garrett. He is not TJ Watt. He is not Max Crosby. He is not all of these guys that are making these massive, massive amounts of money at his position. He is up there with them, but he is a tier below these elite guys. he feasted on some bad offensive line play last year, which is fine. Sack numbers, you go get your bag, right? I am always in support of a player getting paid. There is not a single time where you will find me saying players should not get paid because the owners have more money than them and they can afford it, right? Spread the wealth, even if it's just a little bit. But Trey Hendrickson has found himself in a very interesting position because he has shown that he wants to play for the Cincinnati Bengals. He has now asked multiple years in a row for a trade and has kind of rescinded it, walked back a little bit. He seemingly is very committed to getting a role, getting a contract in Cincinnati, which is a good sign that these players want to stay in Cincinnati, that T. Higgins wants to stay in Cincinnati, that Trey Hendrickson, that Jamar Chase, that Joe Burrow all want to stay in Cincinnati. But the bad part is, now if you're the owners, you've got to pay them. And the Cincinnati Bengals, not necessarily the greatest at paying their players. It's causing a lot of issues. They're having trouble paying their rookies. Shamar Stewart was holding out for a little while. That's normal policy for these guys trying to get their contracts figured out. This is just a mess because the Bengals last season had MVP level play from Joe Burrow. You look at just his raw stats, he should have won the MVP based on the stats. There's still a lot of other things that I think Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were ahead of him on, but just based off raw stats, he was well within his rights to be in that conversation for an MVP level guy. Will this translate to next season where the defense was awful? It can't get worse from here unless you let a guy like Trey Hendrickson walk. He's got you by the balls right now, right? You need to pay him the money, and you need to figure this out before the season starts. You're lucky that he hasn't demanded a trade and really pushed all the buttons, but this is someone that definitely needs to get figured out before the season starts, and it doesn't look like they're any closer. They've kind of been in this stalemate where the Bengals, they haven't even talked to Trey Hendrickson, and that is a massive issue to me. If you want your guy to stay with you, if you want your guy to re-sign and spend his career, spend his prime with the Cincinnati Bengals, even if you're not really negotiating in good faith, talk to the guy, talk to his representation, see if you can at least get a conversation started if you're close. How far apart are you in your numbers? Right now, it just seems like they're going to sit down, shut up, and let him figure out what he's going to do. That is not the best way to handle things. I know they've handed out a lot of money on the offense, but they need to focus on defense now. They focused on it in the draft. That was a good draft. They got Shamar Stewart. They went out and they got some really quality defensive players later on in the draft as well. They need to bring back Trey Hendrickson. They've already lost Sam Hubbard to retirement. This is a defensive line that is going to get absolutely run over by offensive lines if they do not bring Trey Hendrickson, their main pass rushing threat, back. Shamar Stewart is a nice athletic piece, but he only had 4.5 sacks at A&M through his entire career. It's not good enough. He is someone that I think was worth a first-round pick, but he is someone that needs someone on the opposite side to get that kind of production. If you double team him, he's not going anywhere. Trey Hendrickson needs that attention as well, and that'll free it up for the rest of the defense. Corners, they're great, but what makes corners even better? Not giving the quarterback time to sit in pocket, deconstruct a defense, and make a good throw. You need Trey Hendrickson in the worst possible way. You write that man a blank check if you have to. You have the money to do it. You have the cap space to do it. Pay Trey Hendrickson right now if you want to make the playoffs. If not, you can enjoy another year of Joe Burrow's prime being wasted by not making the playoffs yet again in a very, very dangerous AFC. An AFC that just got even better, right? You, of course, have the Chiefs, but the Broncos made the playoffs last year. The Chargers got better. The Raiders got a whole lot better. In your own division, you have the Ravens. You have the Steelers that somehow always find a way to win. Yourself and the Browns, who definitely got a little bit better this offseason. I think the Jaguars got a lot better. I think they have a real chance of making a run. The Texans have made it to the second round 2 years in a row. You're running out of spots for yourself in the wild card. It's going to be really, really tight. The Bills will make it. The Dolphins have a chance to be dangerous. The Patriots have a chance to be dangerous as well. And we don't know what the Jets are going to do, but it's a tight AFC race. And if you don't bring Trey Hendrickson back, you're more likely than not going to be on the outside looking in yet again. This is a code red emergency situation for the Bengals. Bring Trey Hendrickson in right now. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think it's as necessary as I do for the Bengals to bring back a premier pass rusher like Trey Hendrickson? What do you think the Bengals would be with or without him this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take and thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. We'll have one more guest on tomorrow, co-host at GSMC, to talk about all things from around the world of sports. I hope you will tune into that. I will see you then. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to